His last name is Zhang, and we call him Zhang. Zhang is from my hometown, and he's about my age. He works at a well-known TV station in China. Growing up, he never encountered anything particularly strange, so he's always been skeptical about superstitions and the supernatural. However, something peculiar happened in early September of 2017. He remembered that day clearly. It was on September 3rd, that was a Sunday. Zhang and his wife were at home and they usually have a great relationship. But for some reason on that day, Zhang felt an unexplained sense of frustration and irritability. Around 5 p.m. Zhang and his wife had an argument over a trivial matter, which they later found quite unbelievable. It was a minor issue, but for some reason it escalated into a heated dispute. During the argument, Zhang couldn't suppress his anger, possibly due to the stress and fatigue from his demanding job, which often involved night shifts and poor rest. Feeling particularly agitated at home, he stormed out, slamming the door behind him. He just wanted to clear his head. He was worried that if he stayed at home, the back and forth bickering would only intensify, leading to an endless quarrel. Grabbing his phone, he left the house, put on his headphones, and started walking aimlessly while listening to music. That day was the 13th of the 7th lunar month. 2 days later, on September 5th, the 15th of the 7th lunar month, is known as the Hungry Ghost Festival, or Ghost Day as we traditionally call it. Where does Zhang live? In the Chaoyang district of Beijing. After he left, he didn't get far before he reached a crossroads. He noticed that there were quite a few people around, burning paper money on the ground within circles they had drawn. He didn't pay much attention to it at first, just walked around and continued strolling forward. It was right at the bend of the crossroads where he saw a particularly large circle on the ground, filled with ashes from burnt paper money. It seemed like the burning had just finished and the people had just left. The circle was so big it completely blocked his path. Zhang was already in a bad mood, having just argued with his wife and feeling particularly annoyed. Seeing such a large circle at the crossroads, he thought, wow, this takes up so much space, blocking the whole road. At that moment, his anger flared up. Instead of going around, he directly stepped right through the pile of ashes. As he did, a gust of wind blew just as he stepped on it, sending the ash fragments flying up. Zhang quickly took a few steps, brushed the ash off his clothes, stomped his feet, and seeing that no ash had stuck, he continued on. After wandering around and listening to music for a while, his mood gradually calmed down and the anger subsided. He thought to himself, what's the point of all this? It's not a big deal. It's the weekend after all. Forget it. I'll just go home and apologize to my wife. He turned around and headed back, stopping by the supermarket to buy some fruit. He figured he could tell his wife that he had gone downstairs to buy fruits, which would also serve as a way to save face. As he was walking home with his purchases, the sky had begun to darken. Approaching the crossroads he had passed earlier, he saw two figures standing in the large circle from a distance, even as it was getting dark. An old man and an old woman, both seemingly very aged with wrinkled faces and stooped bodies, stood at the intersection, but they were staring at him. He initially ignored them, but after a few steps, he looked up and saw that they were still staring at him. He wondered why they were looking at him since he didn't know them. But as he got closer, the old woman suddenly stretched out her hand towards him, seemingly asking for money. He glanced at her, then looked away, ignoring the two, and continued walking. After walking about 10 or 20 meters, Zhang felt a chill down his spine. He looked back and saw that the old man and woman had turned around, still standing at the intersection, staring intently at his back. He shuddered, said nothing, and quickened his pace to head home. When he got home, he didn't mention this incident to his wife. He apologized for the earlier argument, admitting he was wrong. And after comforting her, the matter was settled. He told his wife, I went out and bought some fruits. The peaches are really good. Let me wash one for you." At that moment, his wife wasn't angry with him anymore and said, "I just got a call from work. They urgently notified me that I have to go on a business trip with the company tomorrow morning. I'll be in Shanghai for a meeting and won't be back until the evening of September 6th. Zhang replied, "All right. Have a safe trip." The two chatted for a while and the argument was forgotten. Since his wife had to travel the next day, she packed her luggage and went to bed early. Zhang, who often worked the night shift, went to bed late. It was almost 2 a.m. and he was still lying in bed looking at his phone. He was browsing on his phone. Suddenly, his wife, who was sleeping beside him, seemed to be talking in her sleep. She was mumbling something indistinct. He noticed. His wife's expression was tense and her body was trembling. Zhang realized his wife must be having a nightmare. So he quickly woke her up. He asked, "What's wrong?" After waking up, his wife was panic-stricken and terrified. After comforting her for a while, his wife told him about her nightmare. She had dreamed that an old woman and an old man standing in the corridor outside their apartment's door, staring at their home with frightening expressions. The old woman's face was particularly scary, with wrinkles all over and her body twitching. Her face was twisted and her features were contorted like a big rat, which scared her so much. She tried to close the door, but it wouldn't close properly. Every time she closed the door and tried to pull it, the door would open, revealing the two figures in the corridor staring at her motionless. She woke up in fear. Upon hearing this, Zhang instinctively thought of the old man and woman he had seen at the crossroads earlier that evening. Could there be such a coincidence? He hadn't told his wife about it when he came back because they had argued, and he was being careful with what he said. So she didn't know what he had seen outside. She only knew he had gone to buy peaches. At that moment, Zhang felt a bit uneasy, but he didn't say anything else. He comforted his wife, telling her it was just a nightmare, and that she might be nervous about the upcoming trip. He told her to sleep soundly and not to worry, as she had to get up early. After that, he managed to soothe her back to sleep. Zhang looked at his phone for a while and then prepared to sleep. He plugged his phone into charge and got up, and intended to go to the toilet before settling down for the night. Their toilet was located right next to the front door. Before entering the toilet, he subconsciously pulled the front door. He hadn't thought much about it. It might have been because of his wife's nightmare about the old man and woman staring at their house from outside, saying the door wouldn't close properly. So he pulled the door, and to his surprise it opened. He was shocked and thought, "What's going on?" The door hadn't been secured properly. Their door was designed to lock by turning a knob after closing, and it could only be locked from the outside with a key. However, it was their habit to lock the door immediately after entering, and they never forgot to do so. It had become a conditioned reflex. He went to the toilet and after finishing checked the door again. This time it was indeed locked, and he went back to bed. The rest of the night passed without incident. The next morning, September 4th, his wife left early with her luggage for a business trip to Shanghai. As for Zhang, he was working the night shift and he works at a TV station in Beijing. The nature of their work involves 3 people on the night shift, one for the first half of the night, one for the second half, and another for the entire night. After working one night shift, they could rest for 1 to 2 days. That day, Zhang was on duty for the first half of the night. There's an unwritten rule for the night shift. If you re on the first half, and there are no special circumstances after your shift, you can go home. Technically, this was considered leaving early. But since it's not strictly monitored at night, everyone did it. So around 3 a.m., after handing over the night shift duties, Zhang left the company. He planned to go home, take a shower, rest for a bit, and then have a good sleep. His home is very close to the TV station, just 3 kilometers away. He planned to exit the north gate of the office, scan a shared bike, and ride back home. Riding the bike, he habitually put on his earphones, listening to music as he rode through the vast night towards home. It was quite cool at night, and with few people around, the ride was comfortable and carefree. Jung was riding his bike, listening to music, enjoying the breeze. Since he was on the side of the road, he felt quite safe. He didn't expect a bus to suddenly rush from behind, and since the bus didn't have its headlights on and was driving aggressively, it overtook him on the left. Jung was startled when he noticed and quickly applied the brakes to slow down. But the brakes weren't very responsive. Frightened, he jumped off the bike, stumbled a few steps, and finally came to a stop. At that moment, his bike was less than 2 meters away from the back of the bus, and he was sweating with fear. He wondered, why is this bus driving so aggressively? It's the middle of the night. The bus stopped right behind him. Jung didn't rush to go around. He thought he'd wait until the bus left before continuing to ride. The bus stopped at the intersection and the doors opened, but there was no one at the bus stop. Jung observed the bus. It didn't have its headlights on and the inside was dark, making it hard to see if there were any passengers getting off or even if there were any passengers inside. However, there were street lights on the roadside, so the area was quite bright. He had just finished his night shift, was listening to music with his earphones, and was in a relaxed mood. So he didn't think much of it and waited behind the bus. He thought to himself, there's a night bus at 3 a.m. Despite no one getting off, the bus still stopped at the station and opened its doors, which was quite responsible. After about 10 seconds, the bus closed its doors and left, quickly turning a corner up ahead and disappearing from sight. He was heading back on the shared bike, but when he started pedaling again, something felt off. The bike that was once a breeze to ride now felt like a chore. It's tough to pedal, it's slow, and it's nothing like the effortless ride he had at the start. He didn't get far before he was huffing and puffing, feeling exhausted as if he was climbing a hill while holding a bag of stuffing. With his headphones on, he's straining to push forward, but amidst the music, he's catching some static, like a woman's voice trying to get through. He couldn't make out the words. It came and went, flickering in and out of hearing. After a few of instances, Jung realized that wasn't just noise from his headphones. He yanked them off, looked around, and saw nothing, but found only himself on the road. In a split second, trying to steer one-handed, he found himself unable to move the bike and ended up toppling over to the side. He wondered what's going on here. He put away his headphones, no more music, and got back on the shared bike to ride forward. Once the headphones were off, the strange voices stopped, but the bike was still a pain to ride. He checked the tires, but they seemed fine. He's almost home, so he decided to push through. But just a few hundred meters from his apartment complex, he couldn't push on anymore. All right, forget it, he thought. I'm not struggling anymore. I'll just lock up and walk the rest of the way. After locking the bike and checking the app to pay for it, he's surprised to see it took him a whopping 28 minutes. Jung was taken aback, saying, "Why was I so slow today? Normally it took me no more than 15 minutes to cycle the 3 kilometers from company to home. Here he was just a few hundred meters away, and it's been 28 minutes. He found it quite strange. He got off the bike, feeling the shared bike was a real workout, and his legs were sore. He stretched his neck, rolled his shoulders, and strolled home. By the time he got home, and it's almost 3:30 in the morning, he took a shower. Then instead of going straight to bed, he turned on his computer, planning to put on his headphones, listen to some music, and surf the web. As soon as he put on his headphones, he suddenly heard that familiar woman's voice he heard on the road talking to him. And this time, it's not just sound. He felt a cold draft on the back of his neck. And the voice was clearly not coming from his computer or the web page. He closed the web page and the music player. But the sound persisted, though still indistinct. Buzzing, the sound was quite loud. Jung quickly turned to look, saw nothing, and the sound stopped when he removed his headphones. He wondered what's going on. Damn, I work the night shift all the time, and this has never happened before. He lied down on the bed, pondering the situation. Every time he put on my headphones, he heard something talking to him, and it stopped when he took them off.